Tensions are growing between China and Japan over the future of Taiwan. China's defense ministry is sending a new warning to Japan that it will, quote, pay a painful price if a line is crossed in Japan's latest plan to deploy missiles near Taiwan. However, Japan's reportedly denying claims that President Trump asked the Japanese prime minister to avoid provoking China. Now, Beijing is now turning to France to try and shore up support. Bloomberg reports this. An official at Macron's Élysée Palace said Thursday, Paris is consistent in supporting the one China policy, the recognition that the mainland and Taiwan make up a single nation governed by Beijing, and calls for the status quo to be respected. Now, Macron is set to visit China this week to hold some economic and commercial discussions. Is that a factor in that statement from that spokesperson from the Élysée Palace? Well, let's bring in Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. I want to get your reaction to that, because I think the key thing here is Macron's going to China to talk about economic policy. And here you've got this statement of, you know, the French, the government, putting their support behind China. And yes, Beijing runs Taiwan.
Well, certainly, Cheryl. What's going on here is that Beijing is going on a bender. So every conversation it has with every country is going to focus on Japan and Taiwan, as it has since November 7th. That's when Prime Minister Takaichi said that Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be a survival-threatening situation for Japan, which would permit her to mobilize the self-defense forces. Since then, China picked this confrontation, and it has been losing. And so I think that China is now looking for allies far and away. But clearly right now, China has been humbled by someone who will not be cowed by Beijing's bluster.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point. But, you know, another issue that they're having right now, and this is a global story, is this Hong Kong fire. You know, 151 people are dead. There's still about 40 missing. This was last week. It was a high-rise building. Officials say the death toll could even rise beyond that. They've been searching for survivors, but that could take 3 to 4 weeks. And there's been 13 arrests. All were working at a construction firm in charge of renovating that building. They're facing charges, negligence and manslaughter. Hong Kong announced a 3-day period of mourning, Gordon. But, you know, there's a lot of anger in Hong Kong against Beijing and China. Beijing is now saying, oh, we're going to crack down on any anti-China protests. But is this some type of tipping point, do you think, in Hong Kong in particular, and this authoritarian rule over China, which they've had to deal with?
It could certainly be the tipping point. Just a few hours ago, the Hong Kong police released Miles Kwan, a student who had started an online petition about the fire demanding accountability. And he had been arrested under the national security law. Well, I think that essentially Beijing right now realized that was going too far, so they had to let him go. And I think that that is going to be a sign that the Hong Kong people are indignant. And they're not only indignant over the contractors and the others who failed to follow safety procedures, but also against the Hong Kong government, which seems to be going after Hong Kong people who have been questioning the government's handling this. One other thing, Cheryl, China's propagandists are blaming America and Britain for the fire. And that is just ludicrous, because Britain handed over Hong Kong on July 1st, 1997. And for them to blame Britain, you know, this certainly is a sign of desperation on the part of China.
Absolutely, I agree with you. You know, the other thing is when it comes to desperation is the technology sector in China. They've been moving, these technology companies, moving their AI trading miles apparently abroad because they want to get those NVIDIA chips, and they're trying to avoid U.S. restrictions. This is in the Financial Times. President Trump weighed whether to allow NVIDIA to sell their newest chip to Chinese companies. That reverses existing policy, but tightening restrictions on chip sales to Beijing. Maria had NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang last month all about this. Watch.
In President Trump's first administration, he set the tone perfectly for America to lead in technology and make sure that American companies have the best and first, but for American technology companies to go around the world to compete and win. From a 95% market share in the China market, which is one of the most important markets in the world, when President Trump left office, NVIDIA's market share in China is now 0%. In fact, we've been banned from returning back to the Chinese market by the Chinese. Right. What we really have done is conceded and retreated from the second largest technology market in the world. And President Trump sees that. We underestimated China's ability to accelerate their indigenous technology industry. They manufacture now millions of AI chips. It is very clear now their military doesn't rely on American technology.
Gordon, react to what he just said there.
Almost nothing is correct. First of all, what we have seen is both Alibaba and ByteDance go to these Southeast Asian data centers so they could use NVIDIA chips. And we saw DeepSeek, which doesn't use NVIDIA chips. It is not able to come up with its R2 model, which had been expected last August. And that shows you that China desperately needs American chips. Now, the reason why this is important is because these chips are being used by the Chinese military to develop weapons to kill Americans. And it is not only strategically wrong for America to sell advanced chips to China, but it's also morally wrong. And Jensen Huang will say anything to be able to sell chips to China that can be used against Americans. But I think common sense and Americans just will not permit that. And I hope President Trump does not allow the sale of more advanced chips, especially ones on the Blackwell architecture, to China.
Yeah, real quick before we go, not a lot of time. Liz Peek wanted to jump in here. Go ahead.
Good morning, Gordon. You have been very critical and rightly so about China's economy, showing that it really has been under pressure, slowing down and stuff. And yet their stock market has had a banner year. Is that because of their AI breakthroughs, or how do you really explain that?
I think part of it is because this Chinese equities had fallen so fast. And essentially, the Chinese government then decided it was going to ramp up the equity market by putting government money into it. And nothing gets foreign money faster than a rising market. So I think essentially that's it. But you look at the Chinese economy, especially the numbers that have come out over the last couple of days, it shows that the economy in China is clearly contracting. The PMI for manufacturing, the PMI for services, the earnings of the defense contractors, all of this just shows that China's economy is getting smaller, not bigger.
Gordon Chang, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right, we'll be right back, everybody.